When you look at the Middle East, it's easy to think the rivalry between the Gulf Arab states and Iran is some ancient, thousand-year-old conflict. But that's not really what's going on. This isn't about ancient history. This is a very modern, very calculated power struggle, and it's playing out right now in front of our eyes. So let's get into it.
Okay, so picture the two sides of the Persian Gulf. On one side, you have these gleaming monarchies. We're talking trillions in oil money, rock-solid alliances with the US, and all the most advanced military gear money can buy. Then you look across the water to Tehran. Iran's been hammered by sanctions for decades, totally isolated, and that's forced them to get scrappy, self-reliant, and driven by this revolutionary ideology. And here's the key. The fear in the Gulf isn't that Iran is going to invade with tanks. The real fear is that Iran has figured out how to win a war without ever having to fight one. And that fear, it wasn't theoretical for long. It became terrifyingly real in a single night, with an attack that completely changed the game and showed just how vulnerable these wealthy states really are. So get this, September 14th, 2019. A swarm of drones and cruise missiles flies low and fast, totally invisible to Saudi Arabia's multi-billion-dollar American air defense systems. Their target? A facility called Abqaiq. This isn't just any oil facility. It is the absolute heart of the entire Saudi oil kingdom. It was a flawless, devastatingly precise strike. And in just a matter of minutes, that one attack took out half of all Saudi oil production. To put that in perspective, 5% of the entire world's daily oil supply just vanished. Poof. Gone up in a cloud of smoke. It was a wake-up call for the entire planet about how fragile that whole system really is. So how on earth did we get to this point? To really understand an attack like the one on Abqaiq, you have to rewind the clock. This isn't just a rivalry between kings anymore. It's a clash between two totally different systems, and one of them sees the other as a threat to its very existence. The year everything changed was 1979. Before that, Iran was run by the Shah. He was a monarch, just like the Gulf kings. They didn't always get along, but they understood each other. They played by the same rules. Then the Islamic Revolution happens. Ayatollah Khomeini comes to power, and he flat out declares that monarchy itself is against Islam. A year later, Saddam Hussein invades Iran. And the Gulf states, they pour billions of dollars into supporting Iraq. For Iran, the lesson from that brutal, bloody war was seared into their minds. Never again will we fight a conventional war on our own soil. We have to change the entire battlefield. And this quote just captures it perfectly. Khomeini wasn't just some new leader. He was a true revolutionary. He looked right across the water at those kings and amirs and told them their whole system was illegitimate and that their days were numbered. This wasn't just about changing Iran. He wanted to export his revolution everywhere. So, if Iran decides it's not going to build a huge, expensive army to compete with its neighbors, what does it do instead? Well, it creates a whole new playbook, a completely different way to project power and fight its enemies without ever firing a shot from its own soil. And the core of this whole strategy is something called asymmetric warfare. It's the classic David versus Goliath move. You know you can't win a fair fight, so you don't fight fair. Instead of building tanks, you arm local militias. Instead of buying fighter jets, you build cheap, effective drones. You find your enemy's weak spots, their economy, their social divisions, and you just press and press and press. Iran's playbook is actually pretty straightforward. It's got 4 main steps. First, you build a network of proxy militias. Think Hezbollah in Lebanon or the Houthis in Yemen. Second, you export your revolutionary ideas to communities that are receptive. Third, and this is so important, you make sure the fighting always happens somewhere else. In Iraq, in Syria, in Yemen, anywhere but Iran. And finally, you use those proxies to do the dirty work, which gives you plausible deniability. An attack happens, and Iran can just say, us? No, that was a local group fighting for their rights. And when you take this playbook and apply it to the real world, you see how Iran has literally weaponized the map of the Middle East, turning it into a series of strategic assets and giant buffer zones. The crown jewel of this whole geographic strategy is what people call the land bridge. It's this continuous corridor of influence that starts in Iran, cuts right through its allies in Iraq and Syria, and goes all the way to Hezbollah on the coast of Lebanon. This is a huge deal. It gives Iran, for the first time ever, a direct land route to the Mediterranean Sea, effectively surrounding its biggest rivals. And if you want to see just how brilliantly painful this strategy is for its enemies, just look at the economics. It's insane. So in Yemen, Saudi Arabia might fire a $3 million Patriot missile to shoot down a $20,000 drone supplied to the Houthis by Iran. You do that math. You can't win that way. Iran is bleeding its rivals dry, forcing them to spend fortunes to counter threats that cost Iran pennies on the dollar to create. But Iran's ultimate trump card, its final piece of leverage, is the Strait of Hormuz. We're talking about a tiny 2-mile-wide choke point where something like 20% of the entire world's oil has to pass through. And guess who controls the entire northern coast of that strait? Iran. It gives them the power to threaten or even close the artery of the global economy. It's the ultimate hostage. But all of this, the proxies, the drones, the strategic choke points, as dangerous as all that is, it pales in comparison to the one thing that could turn this Cold War into a hot one that drags in the whole world. And it all comes down to this number, 60%. That's the purity that Iran is enriching uranium to. Now you might be thinking, is that a lot? Well, for a nuclear power plant, you need about 3 to 5%. 60% has zero peaceful purpose. It is a stone's throw away from weapons-grade material. This isn't about energy anymore. This is a countdown. And because of that, what experts call breakout time, which is just the time Iran would need to make enough fuel for one bomb, has shrunk dramatically. It used to be measured in years. Then it was months. Now we're talking about a few weeks. The fuse is getting incredibly short. And look, a nuclear Iran would almost certainly trigger a nuclear Saudi Arabia. They've said as much. And you might think, okay, another Cold War. We've done that before. But this would be so much more dangerous than the one with the Soviets. Back then, we had red phones, back channels, some level of understanding. Here, there is zero trust. Missile flight times between these countries are less than 5 minutes. There's no time to think. It would be a nuclear standoff with no rules, no doctrines, and no safety nets. So where does all this go? With so many moving parts, the proxies, the drones, the diplomacy, and that ticking nuclear clock, the future of the whole region is balanced on a knife's edge. You can really see 3 ways this could play out. The first is a kind of fragile détente, a cooling of tensions. We're seeing a bit of that now, with deals brokered by China. It's not about peace and friendship. It's about the Gulf states needing stability to pull off their massive economic plans. The second path is that those same states just wait, hoping for an internal collapse in Iran from all the domestic unrest. But honestly, the most likely outcome is just a permanent, structural Cold War, a state of constant, simmering rivalry that could boil over at any second. Because ultimately, when you strip everything else away, it all comes down to this. The entire system is so tense, so volatile, that all it would take is one mistake. One miscalculation in the Strait of Hormuz, one drone strike that can't be denied, one single spark, and the whole region could light up.